Hello, everyone. I can see there's some people joining now. We'll give it a minute or so, and then we'll just start with the webinar. Okay, I can see there's still a few people joining, but hopefully we should be good to go. Thank you all for joining this webinar. This is part of our QR webinar series. And I'll delve into what GS1 QR means. But also this webinar is specifically about how QR can help with kind of communicating sustainability to consumers, as well as the starting point to enable regulatory implementation around digital product passports and related transparency and circularity regulation. Because we don't just want it to be all theory and no practice, we've invited our members, the XD Pro. I've got Lauren and Julie here. And they will kind of take us through a little bit of how they went about thinking about GS1 QR and regulatory implementation around it to product passport, how that is shifted, kind of the way that they think about these regulations, and any tips that they might have for you all on how to get started. So without further ado, we'll start with the webinar. So I just wanted to pause for a moment because I took this picture myself, actually. And this was in a textile recycling facility in the Netherlands. The size of this room is not quite clear from this picture, but this is the incoming warehouse of this textile textile recycling facility. And this is just maybe like a sixth of it. And there's 40 more of these just from this company around Europe. What did they say? They said they actually can't really even process all the clothing that comes through for resale, and often even for kind of recycling of the fibers. This is quite important because it really shows how we're kind of buried on an amount of clothes, of items that we don't want anymore, but we also don't really know what to do with them. And this is why there's a lot of regulation around the world that not only is in trying to incentivize consumers to recycle, but is also making brands, whether they're textile, toys, furniture, pretty much any sort of product, they're making the brand understand their supply chain, communicate their materials to consumers, but also to recyclers through a variety of methods that can be enabled by something like the digital product passport. So in today's session, we'll understand a little bit the basics of DPP, digital product passport, how this relates to GS1 and GS1 standards, why is it important to future-proof your compliance, and understanding what that means really in practice with our guests. And then understanding also how why this is important in the UK as well, even if we're not directly subject to EU regulation. So what are digital product passport? Really what it is that it's a mandatory electronic record of an entire product life cycle. It should be available on the product itself, potentially also on the packaging. The exact requirements are not yet clear, but really a consumer should be able to access it throughout the life cycle of the product. For example, through a QR code. The product passport informs different stakeholders. That could be suppliers, that could be consumers, that could be recyclers, repairers, and so on, about the footprint, the spare parts, any manual material of that product, and of course, recycling instruction. This pretty much impacts everybody that is in food or medicine. There's a first working plan, which means that the European Commission is studying the most polluting sectors at a macro level, and therefore those sectors should be also the first one that are in scope of digital product passport. That does not mean that other sectors are safe from it. All product will be in scope of digital product passport. However, there will be in scope of it in a slightly staggered way. So we know the textiles are first. We know the furniture also come pretty early. There's something around electronics and so on. So textiles is not just clothes. Textile is also item made of textile or with textiles in them. So this is to say, pretty much everyone will have to do this at some point soon. So it's really important to think about it in a proactive way rather than be stunned by the regulation when it becomes increasingly obvious that you're in scope of this at some point very, very soon. So that's why we decided to support our member with this and kind of walk you through what that means. Just a refresher for those that haven't attended any of our webinars before, that are new to the organization. GS1 UK is part of a global federation of standards. So we've got GS1 Global. We are the UK organization of GS1. We've got about 60,000 members. And we're neutral, we're not for profit, and what we do is basically we just bring our members together and find ways to address regulatory implementation, traceability, consumer relationships, and so on, using the power of standards. Everything we do is built on standards, and our standards are many, but they're usually classed into 3 different types. So there's an identification standard, which is the most common, the number that you see on the barcode, you will scan it at checkout. That is an identification standard called G10. We've also got capture standards and we've got share standards. How do we work with industry? So we've got members. Our members are pretty much anyone who needs a G10. That could be anyone in any industry. We have membership across the entire industry spectrum. Could be food, could be toys, could be textiles, could be construction, could be medicine. Pretty much anybody can be a member as long as they benefit from having a G10. Also, of course, we not only work to support members, but we also try and kind of make our standards kind of future-proof for the future by making sure that when there is an update needed by industry, we come together as a global federation and we work on updating the standard guidelines and kind of other standard technicalities to make sure that they work for today and tomorrow. And we also work with what we call GS1 UK partners. GS1 UK partners are solution providers that have shown that they implement our standards correctly. That doesn't mean that solution providers that are not GS1 UK partners will not be doing so, but GS1 UK partners will have gone through that additional layer of checks for GS1 compliance. Why is it important to use standards? Well, they facilitate collaboration, they enable open supply chain at a much more reduced cost, they enable interoperability, they encourage innovation, and more importantly, they prevent vendor lock-in. If your system use standards and are encoded, and your data is encoded in a standardized format. If you change providers of whatever part of your business, that doesn't create a lot of disruption because of the standardized kind of format of your data. Why is this important in the context of sustainability? Well, really, sustainability and sustainable decision start with product identification and verifiable data. This has also been recognized by regulators because many regulatory initiatives, whether you look at the EU, whether you look at the UK, or even in Asian markets, in the US, most of these initiatives will involve a level of product identification rules. So, for example, digital product passports, or deposit return scheme, and or verifiable claim that are verifiable by a third party using kind of interoperable data. So something around green claims. So can you claim that your product is organic or that it's sustainable? What is the data behind that? Can you justify that? The EU deforestation regulation, which is a due diligence for certain commodities. What's the data behind you declaring that your products are not made of kind of unsustainable commodities? Emission kind of claims. All of this has got to have data behind it, not just from a best practice perspective, but also now from a regulatory perspective. Also, consumers demand this information. So demand product information on kind of sustainability, product footprint, where does it come from, any sort of human rights kind of protection behind those products, but also they want to understand how to recycle that product or recycle its packaging where they live. So all of this can also be a value driver, and it's really important to not look at sustainability just as a, I have to do this, but also it's a way of creating a better relationship with your consumers. Which again is a value driver and it reduces your reputational risk. Standards, therefore, are key to ensure products, people, places, and more can be identified in an interoperable way. This reduces implementation cost and reduces the risk of missing data. Therefore, and why is the interoperability important? Because now we're not just looking at UK supply chain, we're looking at global supply chain. And the fact that sustainability or traceability regulation is asking for upstream information, often those products are not made in the UK. And therefore, it's really important to use standards to ensure that all these data systems have a common language and can talk to each other fairly seamlessly with the right protection, but in principle, fairly seamlessly, to make sure that compliance become a much easier thing to do rather than what it's been in the past. As I was mentioning, there's a lot of EU regulation on this. We've got anything from, they look at the whole life cycle of a product. So we're looking at kind of design principles that have to include circularity and repairability into it. We're looking at due diligence regulation for materials. We're looking at kind of manufacturing provisions and kind of manufacturing traceability data. We're looking at kind of the role of consumers in this. So consumers are not just the end of your supply chain. Consumers are just a point of your supply chain now. And so because consumers need to be able to understand where that product comes from, but also where it can go. So can a product be repaired? Can it be reused and resold? Can it be recycled? So all of this information now is required by one regulation or more. And therefore, it's really important to keep an eye on it at a holistic level, looking at the whole product journey, because otherwise you might risk your product being stopped at the border by custom. You might be subject to fines if you're not compliant. So it's really important to understand whether your product falls into any of these kind of regulatory kind of requirement and understand proactively what you should do about it. For example, even if we don't know the full details of digital product passport requirements, we know that the GS1 G10 is compliant with the ISO standards that are required as a basic of digital product passport. So if you've got a G10, you already got something. So it's really important to understand these regulations. Ultimately, looking at something like digital product passport, digital product passport is about a unique identifier, and it's about making sure that product information is in a consumer accessible format. Again, that is regulation, but it's not just useful for regulation. Think about selling a UK product into the French market. With a GS1 QR, you can actually, you've got a UK product that suddenly can be connected to the internet and wherever your consumers are. Your consumer can read information on that specific product in whatever language they need. And this is something that you just discussed with your solution provider. But you know that that information will always be accurate to the product, as long as you've, of course, implemented kind of what the full DPP requirements will be. And on top of that, you can also add any kind of marketing information. You can add, your brand history, any sort of kind of brand events or promotion, things like that. So really, it's a really new way for your consumers to interact with the product itself, not just the brand as a whole. This means that actually this sort of regulation creates a lot of opportunity around your whole business. So it's something that can help you with building better upstream visibility, but also means better upstream efficiency and a better view on your operation that is actually data driven. It can improve your consumer relationship, as we said, but also it can help you look and create a strategy for how you'd like the consumer to give your product maybe a new life, or how your consumers should engage with your product at the end of the product life. Really, all of this is possible using GS1 QR codes. So whatever the specific of your product, wherever it sits in terms of regulatory implementation, GS1 QR can probably cover a lot of those requirements. And so, again, we thought it would be best to hear from people that have actually done this. And so we would like to kind of talk to Lauren and Julie from EXD Pro. Thank you for being here. And they'll give us a little bit of an overview of what their business is, and then we'll do a bit of a chat with them to understand kind of how they went about this, what's next, what's next with DPP and similar regulation. And please do ask questions in the chat, because we'll read the questions in the chat and try to answer them in the time that we've got. So please, Julie and Lauren, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Laura. And firstly, thanks. I'm delighted that you've asked us to come along this morning, and our partnership with GS1 just seems to keep growing, and you are a great partner to work with in developing the future of DPP and digital passport. Just to give you a little bit of insight who we are, most of you people may not know of EXD Pro. We are an established brand. We've been going since 2017. We're actually the manufacturer and the designer, and we work with some very big brands. We're 100% licensed. You can see some of the key licenses on there: Marvel and Minecraft, Call of Duty, Activision. We do very high volumes, but very high quality detailed. We're very creative in our approach. I feel that's one of the reasons why operationally we've been very much on the front foot of looking at DPP. We're very much into the digital led, because our fan base is very savvy. They want sustainability. They want to know about that digital experience, and I feel that that's something that EXD Pro is hoping to embrace, and feel like we've sort of got on the front foot, because we have been forward thinking and really approached this from a really sort of quite a number of years now. And I'll let Lauren go into more of the detail as to how long and everything. But yes, it's been a great partnership with yourselves, Laura. So I'm delighted to come across this morning and have a chat with you guys.
Thank you, Julie. So Lauren, you and I have had a chat as a prep for this webinar, really. And I was quite stunned to understand how early you even started thinking about digital passport. as I mentioned during the presentation, we still don't have the very kind of full detailed requirement for digital product passports. And often with GS1, we hear that brands are still holding off, they're still not getting ready because they don't have 100% of their requirement. You kind of gave me a completely different side of that perspective. So please let us know when you started, why you started.
So a little bit of background for us. So as Julie said, we've always been very kind of digital in our thinking, even though most of our products are physical. A couple of them do have digital elements. But so this kind of all started for us way back in 2020. So we made the conscious decision as a company for all of our packaging to be plastic free. So we didn't want any cable ties, no washes. We wanted everything to be able to be recyclable. And I'd say it was quite the feat to get there. Anyone that has done the design, I'm sure there'll be people on this call that have done any packaging reworks. And obviously the life cycle of any products that are in market, it does take quite a while to filter out and have completely new packaging in the market. So for us, that was an exercise that we undertook back in 2020, and the stars kind of aligned that we ended up meeting our current supplier for DPP way back when. And then it was probably about 2022 where we started printing on, so our product passports have been on our packaging since 2022, which was very, I'd say we did definitely jump the gun, but the beautiful thing about, obviously the great thing about it is that it's a QR code. So for us, that we felt the confidence in that QR codes are dynamic. So as the legislation kind of changes and solidifies as time goes on, it's all digital, so that can change at the same time. But the biggest stumbling block for us, we always knew, was going to make sure that it was on our packaging, or whether it's, and if that's on the physical product or packaging, whatever that looks like, that's the hardest step in the journey. Everything else can be dynamic and can evolve as time goes on. And that's what we really wanted to do. So we wanted to make sure that we were future-proofing the company. We kind of had a bit of an experience of, sometimes these things do take time to implement, but we knew once it was on there, that gave us the peace of mind to be able to experience what that looked like. It also gave us time to test and refine what that user journey looks like, and allowed us to add, a added benefit to the customer to really understand what they found, what was interesting. So not only looking at it from a legislative point of view, but also looking at it of like, what are they interested in? What different regions are interested in what information, and help us kind of prioritize what that might look like. And we work really closely with our supplier to sort of map out what that journey looks like. And that's still ongoing. But yeah, we did definitely start this really early. But, I feel like there's still definitely, plenty of time to jump on that. But I definitely say that has relieved a lot of the pressure and has allowed us to kind of move and evolve as the compliance and more information comes forwards. We've kind of got that first bit done.
That's incredible. And so you gave us an example of what your digital product passport looks like. And like we discussed, this is just the start of the journey, really. And so looking at, I can see material, I can see recycling, product information. I'm sure that's been quite the challenge to really understand and gather. So perhaps for those who are about to embark on the same sort of journey, how did you go about it? Did your solution provider support you in this? Is it something that you did yourself as a business? And kind of how has that kind of reshaped the way that you might interact cross-functionally with your colleagues and your other department to get this information?
Yeah, so effectively, you don't know what you don't know until you know you don't know it. So we were really guided with our supplier. So I think that's the key thing, that it's kind of like a plug and play solution. So it has all the tiles ready. So we knew what information we needed to update. So there's a lot of guidance on the system. So for us, all of our products have GTINs already. So it made the journey a little bit easier. So effectively, we signed up to a platform. We uploaded our master line list via a CSV. So all of our product information sat on the system. The way that our products work is they sit in different sub-brands. So we have 5 sub-brands, and within that, they all kind of automated across into the relevant categories. Obviously the materials and the factories that we work with are all kind of standardized across those sub-brands. So that all it meant was once all of that information was on the system, all we had to do was map it out, but it also gave us that opportunity to look at where those gaps were. So what were we doing cross-departmentally? There's information that our operations team know, or our production team know, that you don't necessarily always look at from, you know, myself being marketing, we don't have oversight of that. So it gave us a platform to be able to look at everything in one place, find out what information was, and it didn't feel too overwhelming. It's kind of, you get on the platform, you can map out the data that you already know, but it gave us the opportunity to say, okay, this is what information we need to find out and where it sits. And the platform also has some integrations already, so it already had a lot of kind of, you'll see there the labeling within the system. So it was more a case of just understanding, we know we need that because we work with this, you know, XYZ material, and it was just a case of mapping it to the relevant product. So it's not as overwhelming. Once you're on the platform, it wasn't as overwhelming as it seemed before we were on the platform. And then from there, that then gives you a chance to say, right, okay, now we've got the compliance bit down, what else can we add on there? Our stockists, contact information, social media tags, and how to better, as I said before, how to better have consumer engagement on there.
So you've actually done kind of predicted my next question, which was going to be around, you know, of course, you know, we're really keen to hear if you've noticed kind of any benefits in consumer engagement for this, and how you think that's going to evolve with Digital Product Passport.
Yeah, I mean, for us, definitely the first benefit, first and foremost, was just understanding why the priorities for sustainability lie. We've got a lot of information about which of our markets are more interested in it, which are less interested in it. And that doesn't mean we're not going to still provide them with that information, but it might change that user journey slightly. And also just the way that, you know, if certain markets are a little bit more forward thinking, you know, you can provide, you know, a plethora of information, and you may want to take kind of baby steps elsewhere. So for us, that was kind of the first step, was really understanding. And even just with digital, like a digital call to action in the first place, and what markets pick it up quicker than others, and it just gave us that information, like we would get on our website, of what information people are finding the most interesting. Obviously, it's great because it has that call to action back to our website or our social media, so we can kind of get that that additional data capture from our point of view as well, and understanding, you know, what the entry point. And it's great to see when people, their entry point to our products is with a physical product, whether that's in a retail shop. So it just kind of brings it inadvertently, indirectly brings everything back to us as a brand as well. So, and that's kind of the beauty of it for us. The next steps of that are, again, like probably furthering that. So some of the things that we're looking at the moment is like a splash page for these, giving people a little bit more information. So there's just so much you can do once you're kind of embedded on the platform.
That's really great. And actually, so we've got a couple of really relevant questions actually. So the first one was around kind of dynamic QR codes. So actually that's the point that we should have touched on earlier, but it's, you know, why did you choose to use the GS1 QR as opposed to any other QR really that you could have used?
Well, we knew this legislation was coming, so for us it was like there was an inevitable, we've got to be using this anyway, so why not use this and then add value on top of that? Because it's dynamic, we know that that information can change as not only legislation ebbs and flows, but also consumer priorities ebb and flow in different directions. So that for us was kind of a no-brainer.
And also from a dynamic point of view, you can always update it. That's the beauty of a QR code, that you can update that information because it's all digitally driven, so that you can be in charge of that as legislation moves, or if there was an opportunity or there was a change in your manufacturing or your supply chain, you can actually update that as and when, because it is a dynamic code.
That's really helpful, because I think that you know, as the regulatory requirements evolve, you don't want to be rethinking your packaging strategy, or even, you know, if this might have to be included on the product at some point, you know, you don't want to be reprinting that QR every time there's a minor difference in that. And so having a dynamic QR code that directly connects to the product identifier means that you're changing that information.
And you've got to consider it from a cost point of view, Laura, where you're saying you don't want to be consistently reprinting your packaging, you know, you don't want to do that. So to be able to do it sort of digitally away remotely, it is a benefit to everyone.
That's great. And there's another question here. So there's one question around kind of the recycling label. So they're asking how manual was the process of assigning those? Is it a case of just defining the material and the recycling instructions are applied automatically?
So I guess it really depends for us on our platform. So we have like a few different ways that we would gather that information. Notably, most of it comes from you. But what they have on there, so it's a case of you need to know what the legislation is that is pertinent to your product. But when you know, it's quite top level. So in terms of like, you know, we know what type of plastic we work with. Those labels are already inputted on the system. So as long as you know what you need, that label is already there. So you don't have to go out and find what that label looks like.
Okay. And someone's asking also still on the QR code kind of dynamic bit. So do you change the QR codes for a different production batch?
No, it's on every product it will remain the same. So you only ever have to update it on the system, not on the physical product.
So we've got another, sorry, trying to keep up with all the questions. We've got a couple of other questions. So on whether you created this website or portal yourself, or you use a GS1 provider. I mean, maybe I can answer that. You use the GS1 provider, but it's interesting maybe to understand, you know, maybe why you use a GS1 approved provider rather than any other provider.
So I would say the most obvious answer to that question is because that's all about future proofing. If we didn't use a GS1 approved provider, then that we were at high risk of, and the high likelihood of having to, that would mean that we'd then be reprinting our packaging. So we want to work with someone that's already approved, that we know is going to have longevity with GS1, and we're not going to run that risk of having to change anything on our packaging, because those QRs are linked to that dashboard. So we want to make sure we're staying with the same provider to limit that risk of moving forward. And because of that, we would only work with the GS1 approved provider.
Thank you. Someone's asking, what's the name of the provider?
So we work with a company called Biodoc.
Yes, and to this point, we have GS1 UK has a partner page. So depending on what your needs are, whether they're QR codes or whether there's something else, you will be able to see who is a GS1 UK approved solution provider, or just get in touch with your needs and we'll try and help you find the right provider. Someone's asking, how long did it take you to implement it?
It was pretty quick. So we did so we uploaded all of our products via our master line list, but I think this probably, I would assume, is standard across most suppliers, but they also helped with a lot of the mapping. So once you put that information on, there is an onboarding process, which I think we found is probably quite common across suppliers, that they'll then help you implement that. And there is that onboarding process just to sign a sense check that you're going in the right direction. So you do have that assistance when you're doing that. And then from there, the platform, that they're pretty intuitive. So it's quite easy to kind of map things out.
And the good thing is that these are all, say, like with the recycling and some of the compliance sort of data, it's all the same. You know, so it will be for certain countries, it will be standardized. So it isn't that you really don't have the help and support out there. it will just be either work with GS1 or a provider, and all that legislation is to hand. It is a bit of a minefield, but it once you sort of get your head around it and you work with the correct providers, it will be sort of a lot clearer. But they're standardized, you know, they have to be, because it's all about compliance. So it's not as if you have to figure out what's for what. You know, it will be there to, there are tools out there to help, you know, get you over this hurdle.
That's and actually there's a follow-up question that is coming from the chat, which is around whether this platform needs to be accessed via login from the consumers, or it automatically lands on this when you scan the QR code.
No, so it's a web app, but it's open to the user. So once they scan it, they'll land straight on this page. They don't need to log in.
Yeah, that's quite helpful actually. And there's so someone's asking, is QR code taking over barcode for good? That is a good question. So well, I just would like to say yes, although that's not necessarily happening today. What's happening today is the transition to QR codes. So we see, you know, Tesco have started implementing this. They've started working with some suppliers to starting to include GS1 powered QR code on their product. We see other brands starting to run pilots on some products across categories. So this could be anything from you know, detergent to beauty product to food. So it's really about future-proofing that label and ensuring that consumers not only can have a better relationship with your brand and the product, but they can also access, you know, product information, you know, recycling information, just like you see here. And also importantly, all of that means that can also be scanned at point of sale, which is really important, and can enable other traceability purposes, can enable you know, products that are expired to not be sold at point of sale. So really the use cases are massive. And the point is, do you want to tackle all of these different requirements, operational efficiencies and regulation, each one with a different method, or should you just have a GS1 powered QR code, and then because it's dynamic, you can flex it and add different types of information and new types of information as it is required, or as you find it drives your relationship with the consumer. So it is not, you know, we see this happening gradually but at pace, and we think that by 2027 there's going to be a lot of product in store and online that will carry a GS1 QR code and maybe still the linear barcode. But then after 2027 we see that as kind of the end of linear barcode, and then we will see QR code being pretty much the norm everywhere. So interesting. Someone's asking, does your DPP web app work if your system is down? And will it be still scannable on POS with your system down?
Yeah, it will, because they run off separate servers. And also, I can only speak for the supplier that we work with, but they use different servers in different countries as well. So if anything ever to happen, there's always like a backup server. It was one of the reasons that we felt really confident with our supplier, was also just like the speed at which it works. So having that mean, like whether you scan it in the UK, you scan it in Australia, it's going to open just as fast. But because it sits on that separate server, you don't run that risk of any kind of, if a system's down, there's always a backup for this one.
And so someone else is asking, is there a deadline for this implementation? Well, my answer would be it depends. So it depends on what product you're selling. But we see that this regulation is becoming operational between 2026 and 2027. So rather than trying to kind of game the deadline, get started today, get your QR today, and then whatever requirements come through with more clarity as the regulation kind of is finalized, you will be able to add them to that QR code powered by GS1. And there's so they're also asking whether store scanner need to be changed to be able to read QR predominantly. The question is yes, but from our understanding, and this is from a couple of years ago, so it might be even more now, majority of store scanners can actually already read QR because of loyalty schemes. So a lot of them already have that capability, and they can read both QR and linear barcode. So really the work behind it is more the back end side of things, but we know from our retail members that that's already happening, the work is already happening. So it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And we see that happening at pace, with 2027 being a time where we see this happening on an even bigger scale. I think we're almost at time. I can see we still have a lot of questions, but I think there's some information on this that you will find on our website. We will link this. We will put the slides and some useful links on the email you will receive after this webinar. And there's also some links here in case you don't yet have GTINs. If you do have GTIN, I encourage you to look at GS1 powered QR code, but also really we're here for our members. So we encourage you to get in touch with any support needed or any question that needs to be asked. We also have a knowledge hub on our website that can answer some specific questions around point of sale, around kind of at what level you might need to identify your product. And so, yeah, and any more specific questions on sustainability, circularity, and DPP, get in touch with me directly as well if you'd like. So yeah, we'll send all this information after this webinar. So yeah, thank you so much, Lauren and Julie, for doing this with us. We're very, as GS1, when we hear our members doing this and doing this so kind of proactively, it's just such a fantastic feeling, really. And so we're super keen to hear how your DPP journey continues, really, because it will continue, it's not finished. So no, thank you so much. Yeah, I think, Phil, you might need to end the webinar.
Yeah.